Hey, so let's talk about Death Stranding. Um, I said in my last video that I was going to go over Death Stranding in more depth in a later video, so that's what we're going to do now. In the background is some footage from the last little bit of the game, honestly. Don't know if there's any spoilers in here, but be warned if there are. Um, a lot of the game is gonna be pretty similar to what you're gonna see here. Um, a lot of delivery. Um, you're gonna hear from other creators. This game might be a little bit boring or something. I've heard that a lot. It's kind of like FedEx Simulator or whatever. Yeah, I mean, the basic premise of the game is, yeah, I mean, you're a porter. You're transporting goods from location to location to connect America via the chiral network, and yeah, so a lot of the game is like delivery. It's like a delivery simulator, and that's kind of what it is. It's like a walking simulator, but there's more depth than that. There is a story. I think the story is good. I don't think the story is maybe I don't know. It's a little confusing um, for me, and probably for a lot of other people out there too. This game is weird. I want to start that off by saying this. This game is weird. It's definitely a little bit too weird for some people, I think, to really get into, and I think that's why, you'll see a lot of people pick this game up, play for a little bit, and stop. And originally, when I started playing this game, I kind of thought the same thing. I made it a couple hours in, and I was like, man, I really don't know if this game is for me. It started off really slow. It started off really weird. The whole BB thing, it kind of like caught me off guard, and I was a little bit irked by that. It kind of made me feel weird, and I didn't really want to, I didn't really want to keep playing. But honestly, I got used to it, and I followed the story. And once I got past some of the real annoying stuff at the beginning, and some of the boring, parts of the beginning. A lot of cutscenes, a lot of things like that. And honestly, going into this game, um, I wasn't a huge fan of the cutscenes. There are a lot of cutscenes at the beginning of the game, especially, and throughout, but it's very heavy early on, and I think that might slow a lot of players down from finishing this game. Or really getting into the game, because in the prologue of this, and in the tutorial stages, which last quite a while, honestly, I would say, until you really get into the meat of the game, it's really slow. There's a lot of cutscenes, and they kind of drag on. And if you're not a fan of cutscenes, you're not gonna be a fan of that. I personally, like I said, went into this not really being a fan of cutscenes. It's hard for me to sit through a cutscene and stay engaged, but after I after I got a little further into the game, I kind of came to appreciate the cutscenes, because a lot of this game's story is told through these cutscenes. In fact, most of the story, if not all, is told through these cutscenes. And I think that the story of this game is good. I don't think it's amazing. I think that it's good though, and I think without the story, this game would just be a visual masterpiece. And that's what I think this game really truly is, and I think that's where the value of this game comes down for me, is the visual masterpiece that it is. I think that this game looks incredibly beautiful. Um, I mean, I have a decent PC, but I don't think I have this game running on full settings, and I still think this game is beautiful. I don't know if this footage is going to fully capture that, but it is incredibly beautiful. Um, and the landscape and everything. It's a really good looking game, and I think it's worth playing at least a few hours simply for that. And as you get further into the game, you get more of the same visuals, and you get some better visuals. And I think that it's worth playing to sort of stumble upon some of these views. And this footage is taken from the latter half of the game, so we're gonna be in the mountainous region, and so it's really snowy, but you do go through a few different biomes and sort of like climates, and you know there are different scenes here. So this isn't the entire game in terms of landscape, but I do think this game is good. And a lot of this game is just walking, but a large portion of this game, you are dealing with obstacles, you are dealing with enemies, and other things that are going to try to knock you off course. And that's where the main gameplay aspect, I think, really comes from, the real like difficulty from this game, comes from these obstacles that the game tries to put in your place. Obviously, the main one being the terrain. You're gonna be climbing a lot of mountains. You're gonna be trying to find ways around canyons and rocky terrain, and you're gonna be carrying lots of weight, and the weight is gonna slow you down. It's gonna stop you in some scenarios, and it's gonna make things a real pain in the ass. But I think that's really the main obstacle in this game, and that's kind of the point. Or else this game would be fairly easy. But aside from that, there are other enemies. Of course, the main one being the BTs. BTs are, I would say they're more annoying than anything. I don't think that they're really incredible in terms of like making the gameplay more fun or enjoyable. I mean, obviously they do give you a little bit more of a challenge, and I think that a game like this definitely benefits from more obstacles. But I think BTs are just a little bit annoying, in my honest opinion. They're not really super difficult to fight. They don't really feel good to fight. Um, and they're just kind of like in the way. You know what I mean? They're not crazy in terms of making the game more enjoyable. So I'm not a huge fan of them. I like the visuals of them. I think they look cool. I think that they, in terms of story, they're good for the game, but in terms of actually fighting them in game, I'm not a huge fan. The other enemies that are in the game, the mules, the other humans, I guess, that you fight throughout the game, are not incredibly enjoyable to fight either. um, yeah, they're pretty easy to fight at the beginning, I would say. Um, there are a few different weapon types that you can use against them. Um, and they do put up a fight once in a while, but I think they're it's really similar to BTs in the sense that they're kind of just there and they're kind of just annoying. Like they're not really that much of a fight, um, especially individually. When there are a lot of them, they're a little bit tough. But honestly, like I said, they're just an annoyance. They're not really that much of a threat throughout almost the entire game. And I don't think that they're very fun to fight. I don't think that the gunplay in this game is very good. Um, it's definitely not a focal point, in terms of development of the game. Um, and I don't think that the gunplay necessarily needs to be anything incredible. Maybe for Death Stranding 2, it'll be a little bit better, a little bit more fun. Maybe the enemies will be a little more challenging to fight, and so that the gunplay, will make sense if it's better and more enjoyable. But I don't really think that it has to be incredible. That being said, though, you do spend a lot of time in the latter part of the game, fighting these enemies with these guns, and I think that it would make the game more enjoyable overall if the gunplay were a little bit better. That's all I'm saying. Um, and and you know, and especially in some of I love some of the scenes during the war, and I don't want to spoil much from this, but there are parts of this game where you are in combat and you are using guns for almost the entirety of the combat, and I think that it would have made those a little more enjoyable, maybe. And I sound crazy here. The gunplay really isn't that horrible. It's just clunky and it's just not great compared to other games. That's all I'm saying. And it definitely could be better, and I hope it's better in the next game, for sure. Um, and that's about all I have to say about that. Overall, I think that this game is incredible. I understand why a lot of people do not enjoy it. I think that Hideo Kojima definitely has an interesting way of stylizing this game. And the story is, like I said, I like the story. Um, it definitely had me hooked, but I can understand why a lot of people um, think it's kind of mediocre at best. I do understand that. But I think that this game is certainly worth a play either way. I think that it's worth at least trying. You should get into the game, maybe play for an hour, two, three, maybe try to get through a tutorial if you can. If you're really not liking it though, a couple hours in, just don't play it. You know, this game, it is kind of long. There's a lot to it, and I understand it's a little boring throughout. But I think that if you take the time and you really appreciate some of the visuals and the storyline, you'll have a good time with it. And so that's all I'm saying. Just give it a try. I think this game is a visual masterpiece, and I think it's worth at least playing a little bit. All right. See ya.